As I look at the clock right now, it is 11:58 on November 27th, 2025, Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Yes, I'm recording at 11:58, 2025 on November 27th. That means there's 2 minutes left in Thanksgiving. So I start this recording, well, on a Thursday instead of a Tuesday. Turns out that it just seemed like it would be more fun to do it that way this week. Of course, it makes my picks a little different because part of the reason why I'm up this late is because I watched all 3 football games that came on. It just so happens that, well, yeah, I picked on each of those games. I'll tell you how that went later on. But truthfully, today's episode is going to be Just Talking number 21. Of course, as always, it's going to come out on Saturday. This Saturday, which is going to be November 29th. And, well, Just Talking 21. Love these episodes. And this one's going to be fun because I've made some changes literally week of the episode. Thought I was going to talk about one thing, and then I've changed my mind a couple of times, added some stuff, and one I'm going to kind of do an ad-lib on because, well, I honestly think that as of recent events, the subject that I wanted to talk about has become a little bit more interesting. And even as I'm thinking about it, I mean, trying to decide if I'm going to go ahead and even change a few more things. Crazy. So what's the beauty of this? Just sort of make up stuff as we go along. It's fun sometimes. Especially when, well, hey, that's kind of the name of the game every once in a while, right? It's why it's called Just Talking. So I'm going to try to do my best at making this episode really resemble that remark. But first and foremost, I should have done this earlier, but in the whole context of things, I do need to say happy birthday to my wife. Happy birthday. And now I'm going to move on to fill in the blanks. Well, the question would be very simple this week. Did I get enough to eat? The answer to that blank is real simple. Yes. To give you a quick rundown on some of the things that I ate, well, I really only ate 2 different things. As far as dinner went, and breakfast, 2 things as well. Turns out that I ate a ton of bacon. I've been in reserve and just really eating really good for the last 2 weeks prior to Thanksgiving. And I said, you know, I'm going to go ahead and go all out on that cheat day, which would be Thanksgiving. And literally would have to have gone ahead and essentially not been the Flame Hashira, but some random glutton. Demon Slayer reference. But ultimately, like I said, I ate a lot of bacon and a lot of King's Hawaiian rolls. That was breakfast. For dinner, I literally had 3/4 of a pan of lasagna. Yeah, I haven't eaten like that in a while. I'm not going to eat like that again for a while. Maybe ever. It was a lot of lasagna. And of course, some more King's Hawaiian rolls. And I had to wash all that down with, well, cherry Dr. Pepper. Got one left. But yes, there is one left. Beautiful stuff. Not the blackberry, because couldn't find any, but don't get me wrong, I love the cherry too. So ultimately, the question was, did I get enough to eat? The answer is yes. Now we're going to go to the main event. The bell will ring, and it's time for the main event. Right off the bat, I'm already starting to change stuff because I already changed a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. And I think it's going to be real cool to start with this. I usually don't go here and just off the top of my head just sort of start talking about stuff, although that is the idea for the episode. So it only makes sense that I do so just a little bit, huh? I want to start off by talking about the fact that the United States government, earlier in the month of November, I believe it is, decided to do something which was, I'm going to call it bittersweet. I'm not talking about the government shutdown and reopening all that stuff. No. I'm talking about the fact that they decided to stop minting pennies. And they did so in November, and the last 5 pennies came off the assembly line. Like I said, officially now it's November 28th, 2005, but probably, I'm guessing it was a week or so ago that they made those last pennies. Now, normally I always try to tell my kids because they don't quite know how it works, which is kind of neat. But I told them that when you look at any of those coins that we have in this country, there's going to be a stamp of a letter, and it's usually going to be an S, a D, or a P. Those are my 3 favorite ones, especially considering that S stamp stands for San Francisco, the D stamp stands for Denver, and the P stamp, well, that's here in Philadelphia where we have a mint, like those other 2 cities that I mentioned earlier do. But the final pennies, the last 5 pennies, were not stamped with those letters, S, D, or P. They are stamped with the Omega sign. Obviously, it's letting everybody know these are the last ones. Now, some people think it's weird that they've decided to get rid of the penny. Truthfully, anyone who has any general knowledge of money will know that if you have 4 pennies, a nickel, 2 dimes, and 3 quarters, you could pretty much make any amount of change. But without the pennies, makes it more difficult to create 99 cents or any variation after a 5 or below a 5. I can get the 4, the 3, 2, or 1, 6, 7, or 8, or 9. Well, but pennies. So we're going to be doing a little rounding up, or a little rounding down. Most likely up, if you need to use physical money until the days that, well, all the pennies are out of circulation. How long will that be? Who really knows? But the idea that those last 5 pennies are stamped with the Omega symbol and aren't going to go into general circulation, those 5 pennies are going to be auctioned off. Now, I've been told that the very last penny is obviously going to be the one that's going to be sold for the most money. And some people have said somewhere upwards around $2 million for that one. Now, I believe it'll be $2 million on the first time that it's auctioned. But my opinion is it's going to be sold a couple times over the next 5 to 10 years. And the value of that last penny, personally, I believe it'll end up in 5 years, that last penny will be worth somewhere around $4 to $5 million. The second to last penny, probably somewhere around $3 to $4 million, and lower as it goes on. I think that the fifth to last penny, which would be the least expensive of the group, you think, some people would say it's going to auction off for a few $1,000 here or there. I think it might actually auction off for a little more. Now, if it does auction off for more, that just means that very last one is probably going to sell for more as well. Just the way I think it'll probably run. I personally think that the number that people think that it's going to be, I think it's going to be higher. I truly do. I think that those last pennies are going to be valued tremendously high, because there's just something that is always special about the first of something and the last of something. If you're a collector, especially, those are the two that you want more than anything. The first one or the last one. It's always the best ones. Now, my personal favorite reason for why the penny is gone, well, it's simple. The penny is a coin that represents 1 cent. Last I checked, in order to make a penny, a single penny, it cost 4 cents. That just don't math right, you know? As the kids would say, that math just doesn't math. Truthfully, if something has only got a value of 1 cent, but it costs 4 cents to make, it's not worth making. And they finally decided that, yeah, it's not worth making anymore. But I'll tell you right now, that just means that those past pennies that people have that were collector's items are going to be worth exponentially more as well now. Just has a chain reaction. And I think that it's a fun chain reaction as a collector of certain things myself. It's kind of neat to see something get value to it. It's cool. It really is. But it's simple to say goodbye to the penny. Let's see. That one was totally ad-libbed. And I think I'll go to another one that's totally ad-libbed. Turns out that Target, as a company, had an interesting new practice based on the hierarchy in the company. They want employees who are within so many feet of customers to acknowledge them and to speak to them automatically. Just sort of have to drop on a dime and you have to talk to the customer. You could be putting away something on a shelf, and if a customer is within 4 feet of you, you've got to acknowledge them vocally. In other words, got to speak to them. Got to say hi. Got to smile. Got to be ultra friendly. It's now part of their policy. And knowing that, it seems that some of the people who I walked into at Target the other day were certainly, how can I put it? They were a little bit exaggerating of that policy. In fact, it was Tuesday, I believe it was, when I had to go run to Target to get a few things. I saw some of the employees there, and I actually came within range. And one of them, they didn't say anything. But then I moved into a different section, and there was 3 employees, 2 of which were within relative earshot of where I was standing. I could hear what they were talking about. And the one employee got within 4 feet of the other and instantly walked up to him and said, "Hello, how are you doing?" I heard this, I turned, I looked, and I laughed. And the other guy was essentially doing the very same thing. He said, "Hey, hello, how are you doing?" Because that's their policy now. And then the one who initiated the original contact then walked up to a third employee who was, I don't know, 15 feet away from the other two, and went out of his way to say, "Hey, hello, how are you doing?" Sort of making a joke of their policy, which is really interesting because I don't know. It's going to be nice for morale, maybe for customers, maybe. But personally, as somebody who's worked in convenience stores and other places like that, it just seems to me that you kind of want your people to put their nose to the grindstone and kind of get displays put up, shelves filled. Now, granted, you don't have to necessarily snarl at every customer that goes by, but you do have a job to do. And to almost be required to speak to each customer, it just seems to me as if it's going to be, I don't know. I think that it's going to, quote me on it if you want, but I think it might actually be a little bit excuse me, it might be a little bit counterproductive. Let's just say somebody was to stick to this policy and adhere to it to the letter. For example, right now, it is, like I said, November 28th, 2025. That's a Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving, which is Black Friday. All these stores have big sales on Black Friday. So they have to set up everything, and now you're going to have a lot of customers coming in for what they call those doorbuster sales. So how is it going to be possible for an employee to acknowledge everybody within 4 feet of them if they're all trying to run through and get all the best deals they can get? It just seems like the customers are going to way outnumber the employees, and it could be overwhelming if a customer decides to keep coming up and they're going to be asking questions sometimes, and you're going to have to acknowledge them based on this new thing that Target put out there. And let's say some employee really wants to adhere to that policy. Now they could make it totally ridiculous and be in a group of maybe 15, 20 people today on Black Friday as I'm recording, and they could just make sure they acknowledge all the customers that are within that range and get absolutely nothing done that needs to be done if they really wanted to push it that far. So I'm thinking this policy, it's a little different, and I get trying to make the customer feel special. Of course, my policy about customers is the customer is not always right, but they're trying to make it so that the customer is. It's a business practice. I don't know if it's the best way to go about doing business. I really don't. But that's a decision that I'm glad that I didn't have to make and that I don't have to enforce. Whew, really glad. Now, on that note of Target, it seems like this policy happened about a couple of weeks after I had an incident that I thought was rather interesting. And it was at Target as well. Now, typically, I've probably made mention to all of you who would listen how I have a slight problem with self checkout. To me, I think that it's a great thing because I was not the fastest cashier when I was working at Wawa, but I was fast enough to make things move right along. So for me, it's a great thing to go to a self checkout, but I utilize it for what I believe it's supposed to be, a situation where you can actually be there to get your items quickly and get out. So you're out of people's way and you don't have to wait any longer than absolutely necessary. And that's what I use it for. I do my best to personally not go into a self checkout aisle if I have any fruit, something that I have to stop and look up the price, the number for. If I can't scan it, I either don't buy it, or if I'm in a line going to, what do you call it? If I need to buy something that you'd have to punch it in, I then go to a cashier. That way, somebody who only has stuff to scan can do it, and they're not trying to flirt around and figure out exactly what it is that they're trying to do, especially if they've never had experience running a register before. Take them even longer to do the stuff that they're trying to do. And I just think that really self checkout should just be for people who are quick at it, so they can get in and get out. Now, this particular day, I believe it was when was it? Former Mischief Night. It was October 30th, specifically this year, 2025. I get a handful of items at Target, and I know that I don't have anything, no fruit that I have to look up any numbers for, so I'm just going to go and run right through the register and get done with it. Now, the funniest part about that is I looked around and there was no other option. It was only self checkout. Now, knowing how quickly I was going to be able to scan myself and get out didn't really make a difference to me, but considering that there was only, looking around, 1, 2, 3, 4, I want to say there are 4 registers available for self checkout, maybe 5 at the Target that I'm talking about. And the people who were in front were quite slow. By the time I got there, of the 1, 2, 3, 4, there were 4. There were 4 people who were in front of me. And by the time I was up, of those 4 that were at the register, 3 of them were still there when it was my turn to go. They had been struggling. I went up, 1 person that was there had left, and 2 others that were there before I got there, who were bringing up stuff, were there after I was gone. It's crazy. And there was no option. There was no other option. There was no cashiers. All they had was self checkout. Now, this was 11 o'clock in the morning. So, we're not talking about early morning where there was less people in the store. It was hopping a little bit, and there was not a single cashier for anybody to use. It was only self checkout. And I thought to myself, boy, I don't know how that's going to work, because mentally, like I said, there was a lot of slower people who were in front of me, and typically, I wouldn't have gone into the self checkout because of the slower people in front. I would usually go to the cashier at that point because, well, the cashier is faster than those people who were trying to scan their own stuff. Now, we're gonna fast forward again to that very day that I was talking about when the associates at Target were talking to each other, smiling and nodding, and essentially doing their new decree that the higher ups wanted them to do. That same day, when I went to go check out, the self checkout now was closed, and there were only cashiers. My question is, this is where these two things sort of meld together. Now, is it because of that policy that they want employees within 4 feet to acknowledge all customers? Do they not want self checkout so that they can actually have their employees acknowledge the customers? Are they trying to get rid of the self checkout line? I don't know. It's weird. I don't understand it, because it seemed like before the policy they had nothing but self checkouts, and then after the policy they ended up having no self checkouts. And for reference, it was about 11:30 when I went and I saw them after the policy of acknowledging the customers. So it was within half an hour, and they had nothing but cashiers and nobody at the self checkout. So it's almost like with that policy, they sort of cut off the self checkout. I don't know. Like, next time I go, I'll have to see if they're going to continue that, or if it was just for some reason they just didn't open the self checkout. I don't know. It's weird. I wonder if the two are connected, and that's something that I'm very curious to find out. I hope that maybe I'll be able to figure that out in a couple of weeks. Who knows? But I think that's all I'm going to talk about Target right now. But I will talk about this because it's very, very personal and very, very fun. The wife had to get the Telluride to the Kia dealership because she needed to have some work done on the car, some crazy stuff. Battery had died essentially, and it seemed like there was some electrical things going on. There was an issue with the back window, and she needed an oil change. So we take the car there to the Kia dealership to get it ready. They changed their whole building. They were starting to do some stuff on the outside and on the inside, and their actual auto shop now is different than it used to be before. Before, you just left your car, you walked in, you talked to the service writer, then they moved around. Now they've got more space. It's kind of like the Chevy dealership that I've been going to. What they do is you drive up to a set of garage doors, bring your car in, get out, leave it there, take the keys to the service desk, tell them what you're there for, and then they take it from there. That's now the way the Kia dealership is. Same sort of deal. But this is the first time we've been there since they've utilized that new system. The area that used to be for service is now strictly and entirely for parts. It's kind of neat. Everybody's got more space now. That's kind of the idea you want to have. However, when we got there, we told them that we were there for an electrical check, because pretty sure the battery is dead. Not sure if there's anything else wrong. And now, as a mechanic, I know right away that you don't just assume that your only issue is the battery. When you bring in a car like that, the first thing you do is you do an electrical test to make sure that the battery is bad, because you can't do any further electrical diagnosis if you have a bad battery. You can't do it. So if the battery is bad, you then have to replace the battery, and then you can do the other electrical tests afterwards, now that the battery is good. So if an alternator is bad, starter is bad, anything else, the wiring harness, you name it, the computer, you can't test anything unless the battery is good. So I was pretty sure the battery was dead. So the first thing I told them to do, I need you to replace the battery. Once that's done, then get me an electrical test. Okay? We had to jump it in order to get there, because Battery was bad. Now, when we brought it in, this is the thing that was a little curious to me. The service writer was a little confused at first until he realized, oh, that's what we're here for. And he had some people come in, and my best guess is the young lady who was there, who was working on the cars, was not a full tech. In other words, not a mechanic, not an ASE certified individual. I'm thinking that this person was at that basic level where what you would do is oil changes, batteries, and maybe look for you a brake job here or there, or alignment. But no diagnosis. Didn't seem like that was what she was there to do. And the evidence of that is she had a ticket in her hand for a vehicle, and she just saw ours, which was sitting out there, and she looked at it like, is this the vehicle that I'm supposed to work on? And I'm like, I don't know. You're the service writer. She goes, where are the keys to it? Well, typically, you would want to put the keys in your hand and put them in the service desk. However, we had two sets of keys. My set was in the car. I said, might as well just leave it out there because somebody's going to have to go and move the car anyway. And the service writer had to go back out to the car in order to get the mileage. Well, the keys were in. Now, the lady was there and she was looking for the keys. And I was like, they're in the car. Like, just sort of shaking my head like, you're going to be somebody who's going to try to work on a car, but you can't even find the keys when they're just sitting right there in a cup holder. Mind you, it's the same Kia dealership that I had previously told them to not cut the rotors on the brakes, and they did anyway. I told them to replace them because I don't like the idea of cutting rotors, because I said it in my last soliloquy about this place. They don't make rotors as thick as they used to back in the day when you could cut them, because when you cut them, you're going to take away metal from the rotors, making them smaller. So they made the rotors actually a little beefier before, but now for cost-cutting measures, companies don't make the rotors extra thick, so there's less material to cut. And I've already determined that there was about 7 people left, period, that I could think of that I would, counting myself, that I would actually trust to cut rotors for me on any vehicle that I've ever owned. And amongst those people, 2 of them are dead. One of them's in Kentucky. The other 2 are in New Jersey, and myself. So, it's a short list of people, and I definitely didn't trust those people there to do it, especially when I told them not to do it. But these are the same people who are now going to do the electrical diagnosis. I was just a little bit, I started losing my mind. It was so bad that literally the service writer was a bit confused, and the other mechanics that were there, that were coming in and out and getting other cars, they looked lost. And the service desk, there was 2 other service writers in the area who weren't really sure. I don't know if they knew what they were doing with their vehicles. And to my left, I could see a glass encased office, and that was the service manager. And he was just sitting there, literally with his feet up. While the service writers were in a state of confusion. I immediately grabbed my phone. I went to Google and I went to the website of this Kia dealership, and I found the Kia dealership, I proceeded to go on their site and look for positions that they were hiring. And I went to service and I actually applied because in my mind I was so irritated by what I was seeing between the service manager, who really didn't look like he was doing anything, and the service people at the desk who looked lost and confused, and the people who were working on the cars who were a little unguided. I just, in my mind, I was like, all right, now I've got to apply so I can work here, so I can take some of these people's jobs because they're terrible. I got a response, and the response was good and bad at the same time. The response was, well, we don't have any positions at the service department at the moment. And I was like, okay, it's good because I really didn't want the job, but it's the idea that I am definitely qualified to do this better than them. And they irritated me so greatly based on what I would consider very poor performance of what they were doing that I felt the need to actually apply to do it myself so that people didn't have to suffer through this nightmare. I mean, they were confused about when to call, where to call. Just it was not good. It was so not good. Fortunately, they did fix the window issue because I know that poor lady who was lost with trying to do the figure out what car she was supposed to work on. I'm 100% sure she was not working on the window regulator because, first of all, fortunately, the window regulator wasn't there. They had to order it and get it from Korea, so it was going to take about a week in order for the part to show up anyway. So it did, and they put it in. Some tech did it about an hour later. But at the end of the day, that's where my whole situation was. Their performance as a service department was so bad that I felt the need to actually apply for a job at this place so that I could actually maybe improve the situation that was going on there. It was that bad. It was that bad on that day. I don't know what to tell you. It was just aggravating, frustrating, and just overall was probably one of the worst job experiences I ever had in my entire life. Really, really was. Now, to get off of that and get on to something that's more upbeat. The next couple of things I'm going to talk about are much more upbeat. Now, I had told you that I had just started going back to the gym in September. And I started doing that because, well, I was feeling a little bit of atrophy, which was obvious from my torn bicep from a year ago. And I knew that I wanted to get myself back into shape again because it had really been since 2022, so about 3 years, that I hadn't been in the gym. And during that time prior, man, from 2017 up until 2022, I was hitting the thing hard, anywhere between 3 and 5 days a week, every week. And that's how I prepared myself for working in the jail. After the back injury, I couldn't do a lot of the compound movements that I wanted to do, and just totally changed my entire attitude about working out. Of course, without working out, it didn't really matter what I was going to eat. If I wasn't going to be in the jail, I just sort of fell off. So, like I said, after the torn bicep, and how much weaker my arm started to get. And then this weird thing that's going on with my neck and how it affects my other shoulder, because every so often I get pins and needles in my other shoulder. And I said to myself, I can't have that. So going back to the gym, in September I started. And I was going to go with the same approach that I did when I started in 2017. Again, I took the entire month of January, February, March, and April and did nothing but go on the treadmill for those first 3 or 5 days. The beginning of May, I started lifting weights. And at that point, I cut back on how much cardio I did, but I made sure to do an amount. Usually it was a distance, and I said either a mile on the treadmill, elliptical, or the bike before I started lifting. And that's how I went all the way through up until my injury at work. Fast forward to this September when I started. Again, my agenda was the same, because those 4 full months of working on my cardio was important, because it allowed me to make sure that when I started doing the weights, that I would be able to do 4 sets, 5 sets of each exercise that I was doing, and then I could actually do anywhere between 10 and 15 reps of everything I did, because not only because of the strength that was required, but cardiovascularly I was going to have the energy to do so. Plus, having the 4 months of getting myself to the gym to do something that I didn't really like, which was doing all of that walking on the treadmill all that time, that created a habit that I wasn't going to be able to break. Because now here I am, I'm in the gym, I'm there, so I'm doing something, so I got to continue to do something. So in order to focus my mind to make sure that I did it, especially now in a retired state, so there's really only one thing to do. I'd get up early, 5 o'clock or so, and I'd go to the gym. And because of energy restrictions and the amount of weights that I'm doing at the moment, which was just walk on a treadmill, my plan was to go just like I did before, the whole month of September, October, November, December, and get my wind back. And then decide, depending on how my arm was doing, arms, plural, were doing, I was going to decide whether or not to start weights January and then work my lighter weights from that point on. Turns out that in my mind, after September and October, I was like, in the middle of October, probably literally the middle of October, somewhere around the 16th or 18th, I was like, man, my arms I think that they're just getting a little weak. Now, granted, I was not just doing the treadmill, I was also doing the arm bike, because essentially I was trying to do some of the physical therapy things that I had to do when I was just in physical therapy, to try to get my arm somewhat normal. So I would do the arm bike in order to create a sense of some motion, as well as the treadmill. I'd do like 5 minutes on the arm bike, 30 seconds in one direction, then 30 seconds in the other direction. So in total, I was spending about half hour in the gym, 45 minutes if I was, 35 minutes, would be 45, because it would take me, the longest I would walk on the treadmill would be about half an hour, and then another 5 minutes or so on the arm bike. And I was going real well, and like I said, in October of this year, 2025, I was thinking, okay, my wind is coming back a little faster than it did before, because a little bit of probably muscle memory and the fact that being retired, I was able to go to the gym without any consequence 5 to 6 days a week without any question at all. There was no real need to not go that many days, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna be out anyway. I can just go to the gym. I can get up early, go to the gym, and then in October, a couple times, it's like, well, hey, before I pick up the kids to take them to school, I can go to the gym, or I could be like, you know what, I can get them. I can go to the gym before I pick them up, bringing them home from school. My options were there. I could go really early. I could go in the middle of the day. I could go both. Now, granted, I would always try to take one good day off because my back and my hip would just be like, ugh, they wouldn't want to cooperate. And I did that, and I would settle it down. But of course, if I did 2 in a day, oh my goodness, it was torment. But it was not necessarily bad pain. Some of it was because of the hip and the back. Some of it was just a bit exhaustion. But as far as the arms went, they were just like, it just felt like I needed to do something else. And I was starting to think that maybe I was going to start the weights instead of waiting until January. Because now at this point, it would be a couple more months. And I don't know if I was going to start, what do you call it? If I was going to start going backwards as far as the arm strength. And I started thinking that maybe I should do this in November. And I should start working on light weights, getting my arm back the way it should be, working on some shoulder exercises, getting some leg stuff in that I can avoid using my back. So squatting, no. Bench press because of the shoulder, bicep, no. Deadlift, absolutely not. Because of my back and my hip, that is dead. Lifting is dead. Deadlifting is dead. Won't be doing any of that. That's over. That is a thing of the past. Bent over rows, nope. T-bar row, nope. Nothing that's going to affect the lats or put pressure on my back. As much as I love hyperextensions, we're not doing it. We're going to keep away from the back, especially for the foreseeable future. Maybe I could use those hyperextensions to stretch a little bit, but it's not going to be like when I was in high school and pull up, which would be something that most people thought was crazy, but I did it all the time when I was from my junior year and senior year. I did it all the time. Now, typically people would sometimes use weights when they're doing the hyperextensions. It helps those muscles in your lower back. Now, at the time, I was strong. Stronger than I've ever been. Not as strong as the guy I'm about to talk about, with inspiration, but stronger than I've ever been. And at one point in time, there was a 10 and a 25-pound plate back at the hyperextension area at my high school, Southern Regional. Go Rams. The only Rams I'll ever cheer for. And when I started doing hyperextensions, I said, hey, let me try this. And I did it, and it was kind of easy without any weights. So I said, let me try this 10. Boom, 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 boom. Really easy. Try this 25. Boom, 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 boom. Real easy. Then it got weird. I know most people go to the gym and they see different plates. My high school was still back in the old school, so we actually had 35-pound plates. And I said, let me grab one of them. Boom, 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 boom. No big deal. Hyperextension, 35-pound plates. And I said, all right. gonna mess with people's emotions, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna get a 45-pound plate. And so I did. I went and I got a 45-pound plate. Took the 45-pound plate. Now, that sucker really kind of wide. I had to kind of balance it underneath my chin a little bit to do the hyperextensions with a 45-pound plate. That's some crazy stuff, and I used to do it all the time. And up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Did my hyperextensions. And the hardest part about that is, if you've never done a hyperextension, what you're doing is essentially you're locking your feet in a position, you're bending downward, and all the blood rushes to your head. Now, if you have a plate, usually the plate is small enough where you put it up against your chest and you could do your exercise, no big deal. The 45-pound plates are a lot wider and it becomes more difficult to handle them. And you have to make sure that it stays just underneath your chin so that you don't drop it. So essentially, your chin is helping you hold the 45-pound plate when you're doing a hyperextension with a 45-pound plate. And people knew that I was doing hyperextensions because you know how I say that as a gym bro, I hate it when people leave their plates around. I did a little ego lifting with hyperextensions. I would leave the 45-pound plate back there so that people could see it. And they would be like, why is there a 45-pound plate here? Because nobody's doing hyperextensions with a 45-pound plate. I was. But now, we're going to fast forward back to my decision to lift weights starting in November. It goes back to an old high school friend, Frank DeSanto, who was a year ahead of me. But boy, as of recent years, he has literally taken a unique title. And that title is, he's the strongest person I actually know. And that's really cool. Frank DeSanto, without question, the strongest person I actually know. I'm only going to give you one of his numbers. And that number is his bench press max. Visual confirmation. I've seen it. It's on his Facebook page. He bench pressed 550 pounds as his max. 550. Yeah. He's got a couple of posts where he's doing, I think it was it 500 or 510, where he did 2 reps. Yeah. 2 reps of like 510 or something like that. Crazy. And in fact, one of the last posts he had on there was him doing 530 pounds. Now, he's that strong. But of course, much like me, he's beating his body up. He played a lot of soccer. He played football. He wrestled. He did all those things. And it turns out that he and I may end up in another club other than being on the same wrestling team. He had a hip replacement. Now, he's only maybe a year older than me. 48. And he just barely 48. Like, just turned 48, like, last year. No, not last year, this year. Now, because of the injuries that I had, throwing shot put and discus, and then the fall that I had, which essentially knocked me out of working, it ended up hurting my back and my hip. And I don't know if my hip's going to last another 5 years. I don't know. We'll see as time goes on. But Frank actually had to have his hip replaced. And this is why I was able to make the decision to go ahead and get back to the weights. Because I know it had to be a lot mental. And Frank is also not just the physically strongest person I know. He's got to be one of the mentally strongest people I know. Because maybe 2-3 days after his hip replacement surgery, 2 or 3 days after the hip replacement surgery, what he did was he went back to the gym. And he was doing some crazy, crazy stuff. A couple days, and then a week after his surgery, he wasn't hitting the leg press. But what he was doing was he went back to the gym a couple days after surgery, like I said, 2 or 3, and he was right back on the bench, and he was doing 405. Now, you have to consider, if you're going to do any proper benching, it's important to have a good base underneath you. Your back is flat on the bench, but your feet have to be down to support you, and he's still mentally strong enough to have done 405 for several reps, which means his mind was right, and he knew that, hey, I can still do this with the upper body. Just got to make sure that my legs are in right position and my form is good, but I can do the 405 for multiple reps. Now, I like to think that I'm a mentally strong person, but I don't know if I would have made that decision. And I'm thinking, man, that's crazy. And then, like I said, a week after surgery, here he was. Frank was doing military press. Now, that's sitting upright. So you're literally sitting down like you're in a chair, and then you're pressing the weight above your head, which means whatever weight is going above you is now putting down force on your lower body, which is sitting like you're in a chair. So that weight is pressuring on his hips, and he still did it. And I said to myself, if he's man enough to go ahead and hit those kinds of weights with having hip replacement, they reattach my bicep. I think I can manage to do a few curls with 15-20 pounds. And sure enough, I broke through that mental hurdle, and November, first time I got in the gym in November, I went right over to the cable setup, and there I was, curling 15 pounds, one hand, and then the other hand, boom, boom. Built it up for the last month, and I've been curling. And I've been doing some tricep extensions, and I've been doing some cross cable rows, working on the upper chest, the biceps, the triceps, a little bit of forearm stuff. And then for my legs, I've been doing leg extensions and leg curls and calf raises. I haven't gone to the point where I'm going full on leg press because I'm not willing to take that chance on my back. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna wait the end of the month. I'm gonna do some more stretching, maybe work on some hyper extensions, maybe, depending on how that feels. I don't know. This is gonna be a very slow and low process. This is literally gonna be making brisket. We're not gonna be making hamburgers here. We're gonna keep that temperature low, and we're gonna keep that stuff in the smoker for a slow period of time. We're not gonna pop that sucker right there on the deep fryer on the grill and let that thing cook and be done in like 5 minutes. We're gonna take our time with it. We're gonna work slowly, and we're gonna try to not inflame the back. We're gonna do what we can to not inflame the hip. We're gonna do what we can not to tear the bicep that good Dr. Davis put together. We're going to do everything we can not to do that. So, I will not be entering any powerlifting competitions with my man Frank DeSanto, but I will be lifting weights, and I have been doing so since November, and I'm going to continue to do so. And I hope you listen to this, Frank, because I need to let you know that you have inspired me to break through a mental hurdle and perhaps get my physicality back to some extent. Thank you, old friend. Man, I have one more thing that I would like to talk about, but seeing as I took my time and went through the episode the way I wanted to, I'm going to save this one for the next time because I think that it deserves its own serious amount of attention, and I'm going to give it that amount of attention that it deserves. So we're going to go right here, and we're going to put this one on the next Just Talking. Yep, there we go. I just put it on there. All right. I believe. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wrote the notes right down. You who are watching just saw me write the notes that I was about to do today, but I figure I'm going to add that last story of just something I want to just talk about in Just Talking number 22. And I'll even give you an idea. It's going to be episode number 246, and it'll be coming out in January. Yeah, this is, in fact, not just any January, it's going to be the first episode of January. So, if you like Just Talking, just know that I left a little bit in the tank and I'm going to use it in the next episode, which is going to be for next year. Now, I believe that I'm going to ring the bell, and that's going to be the end of the main event. Now, the Spear of the Week is one of my favorite segments, but the fact that it was Thanksgiving when I started the show, I'm going to not spear anybody this week. Instead, I'll go ahead and tell everybody what I'm thankful for. It's a good thing, right? Everybody will have to admit that you got to be thankful for your family, your wife, your kids, all the things, the people that you know, all that good stuff. But I'm going to be thankful for one of the things that The Rock actually kind of said. But I'm going to, how do you say it? I'm going to paraphrase and put it into my own words, essentially. I can certainly say I'm thankful for being able to do this podcast, because it's not because I do this podcast because I want to do it. I'm thankful because I get to do it. As cool as it gets. And that's where we're going to end with that. Now, I'm going to go to my picks for the NFL. Now, this one's going to be a little strange because I did happen to pick 3 games for week 13 that happened on Thanksgiving. And there's still 2 more games that are going to happen on Sunday. So my total picks for week 13 are complete. But that's okay because I need to go over the ones that I had for week 12 first anyway. Week 12, I had the Buffalo Bills beating the Houston Texans. I was wrong. Texans win 23-19. Giants over the Lions. Well, the Giants did what the Giants have done. For the last 5 weeks, the Giants have led in the fourth quarter, and they've lost a game. They did it again. I don't even remember what the score was. Forgot to write it down. Doesn't matter. Lions won. Giants lose. Steelers. I chose them over I chose the Bears over them. And I was right. Bears won 31-28. Raiders and Browns. I was wrong. I expected the Raiders to actually come up with their slump. However, the Browns got Shamor Sanders to actually play and start for them. And as a result, he won. The game was 24-10 Browns. 49ers Panthers. I feel great about this. I never like to be wrong about them. I said 49ers 28, Panthers 20, and the final score ended up being San Francisco 20 and the Panthers 10. I was right. I win. I was 3-2 in week 12. Cumulative number is 37 wins, 23 defeats. I'm ahead of the game. However, week 13, because I already started it, because Thanksgiving, I had the Lions over the Packers, and I lost. Packers won 31-24. I said the Chiefs were going to beat the Cowboys, and I lost. It was 28, which I was right about, at least, the Chiefs, but that 28 wasn't enough to beat the Cowboys, who had 31. What are you going to do? Bengals, I didn't realize Joe Burrow was going to show up because I picked this game 2 weeks in advance, and he did. And because he did, they won the game 32-14 over the Ravens. Now, the other 2 games that I had picked are going to be the Broncos and the Commanders. I still trust the Broncos to beat the Commanders 21-17. And the 49ers are playing the Browns. Brock Purdy is healthy still, but Myles Garrett is coming for him. All I got to hope is that old Trent Williams can hold up against Myles Garrett and they don't move him around, which they could. And I believe the 49ers will still win that game 28-17 against the Browns. And for week 14, my advanced pick, Cowboys versus the Lions. I think the Cowboys looked good, and the Lions, they really are depleted, especially if Amon-Ra St. Brown can't play in a couple weeks. I think the Cowboys are going to win 35-20. Commanders and Vikings, I think the Commanders are better than the Vikings. I say 24-13. Bills and Bengals. Joe Burrow on the Bengals makes all the difference in the world. I think he can beat the Bills. And I'm going to go with him 27 Bengals, 21 Bills. Texans, Chiefs. The Chiefs look like a shell of themselves today. I don't think that they're as good as they think they are. And I'm going to say, without a shadow of a doubt, I like the Texans to beat the Chiefs 28-21. And this one, I wasn't sure about how it's going to play out, but I think I know now, and I wanted to think about it for a little bit longer. And it's Eagles versus Chargers in week 14. I think that Jim Harbaugh is the kind of guy who has enough pieces with his team to be able to hold off the Eagles. And I'm going to bet against the Eagles with the Chargers, especially since I know that the Chiefs are on a slide. The Chargers can can really isolate their playoff position, and I think that they're going to have that feeling about them, and I think that they're going to win this one 24-20 over the Eagles. And those are my picks for the day. For week 14. Now it's time for me to start putting this show away. I've got what everybody knows you can find me at, which is going to be on Instagram at Philip Henderson 5102. Join us, the LIP Facebook group. Join us. I was looking at it the other day. There's 95 members of our group. It's not a few people. It's not as many as we could always hold for, because what do I always say every week? There's always room for one more. Every single time we get one member, there's room for one more. We have 10 million members of our group. Guess what? There's room for one more every time. Join us. You can find me on TikTok every once in a while, and I was almost called it Twitter, but X. I'm out there on those. Just have a look. Hopefully sooner rather than later, this production will be brought to you by the Lip Media Productions, which is what I'm really looking for. The Lip Media Productions. That's what I want to call this podcasting universe that I'm looking to build. I believe I should tell everyone Happy Thanksgiving. At this point in time, it's not really Happy Thanksgiving, but it's more, I hope you had a Happy Thanksgiving and you ate so much that you need to get a bigger belt, and then you can join me in the gym and you can then put holes in that belt. And of course, what show would ever be proper if it didn't come with the words of wisdom? And I think that the words of wisdom today are as follows. The things a person should fear the least are the things they cannot control. The things a person should fear the least are the things they cannot control. Because what is there to be afraid of if you can't control what's happening? Some people would think just the opposite. You should be more afraid of something you can't control. No, just go with it. On that note, my name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip.